Hello and welcome to Calling Scotland. I'm Dr. Joe Murray. Today's pod is from a Yes Pollok event called Talking Independence, where we had a number of speakers talking to a full house at Ross Hall Academy on the evening of 5th of October 2018. Tommy Sheppard, as you know, is an SNP MP at Westminster and a very good talker and very knowledgeable about his subject, i.e. independence for Scotland. I won't delay you any longer. I shall just let you listen to Tommy's talk, which I thought was a fine talk, and hopefully if you're a soft no, you'll listen to what Tommy's saying and take on board what he's saying, because Scotland, in my opinion and lots of people's opinion, should be an independent country making its own decisions for its own people for the future. Tommy Sheppard.
My apologies for missing the start of the meeting. My colleague Rose Curry and I left Edinburgh at 10 to 5, thinking that 2 hours would be sufficient time to get here to be able to speak at the meeting starting at 7 o'clock. But unfortunately we misunderestimated the Rangers home support in its full majesty, who have travelled from every part of Lanarkshire and Ayrshire, it seems, to clog the highways of West Central Scotland. So I apologise for the delay in getting here, but it was due, honestly, to circumstances beyond my control. Colleagues, I want to take you back to 2 weeks and 4 years ago tonight. That was September the 18th, 2014, when we were waiting on the ballot boxes to close on Scotland's historic independence referendum. And then to the morning after, the 19th of September, and the bitterness of the defeat that we experienced overnight as those votes were counted. Well, remember how we felt that weekend. Remember as the disappointment began to dissipate, and we realised that actually, although we didn't win that vote, we had achieved a magnificent victory in terms of the battle of ideas and changing public opinion. And we knew then that weekend that September the 18th did not settle the question, that the matter was not over, that we would revisit it in the years to come. And we have been waiting the 4 long years since then to now to find when the time is right. Can you hear me at the back okay?
Yeah.
It's all right. Oh, it's good. Right. Can you pick it up from here? If I... Yeah, it's fine. Yeah. Right. Right. So we've waited these 4 long years waiting for when the time would be right to ask the citizens of this country again whether they wanted to take their destiny into their own hands. Now, I think it's safe to say, I don't know if people agree, but I've been around the block a few times in politics in Scotland. It's nearly 40 years ago since I first stood as a young man for Grampian Regional Council elections. And in those 40 years of political activity, I have never known a time of such uncertainty, of such change, of such inability to predict the future. And now, as we approach the end game of Brexit, that seems to be the case more than ever before. And the problem that I think we all acknowledge that has given us is that it is very, very difficult to plant the alternative of independence on ground that is shifting beneath our feet. And until we get a little bit more stability, we are not sure how to describe what independence is an alternative to, because we do not know exactly where the country that we are in a political union with is going to end up. But the end game is now approaching. The time is passing and decisions will have to be made. And people are talking right now, and it's a subject of debate that's going to intensify towards Christmas, about whether there should be another vote on the question of Brexit. And that does make me think about the circumstances in which it is legitimate to have a second vote on the same matter. Because of course there are those people, our opponents, who say we will never get a second vote in our lifetime. It will never, no matter how many people want it, it would never be legitimate. And that by asking the question again, you disrespect the answer that was received the first time. Well, I say that in a democracy, people have the right to change their minds. And if the majority of the people want to reconsider a proposition, it is their democratic right to do so. On the other hand, I also accept that you don't have a referendum every week or every month or even every year on the same question. There has to be a period of time during which you consider the result that was obtained the time when you last asked the question. And I think, therefore, we need to apply 3 tests, if you like, in order to determine whether or not it is right to ask the question again in a referendum. And I apply this equally to Brexit as I do to the question of Scottish independence. The first test is there a problem with the information on which the original decision was based? Was it wrong, was it inaccurate, or has it indeed changed beyond comprehension so that the proposition is no longer what was put for the people originally? And I would contend that certainly with Brexit, that is the case, that the information that people were given on which to make up their mind was in many ways bogus, it was mendacious, it was fictitious, and it was not the proper basis to make a result about them or their children's future. The second test would be whether a significant number of people have changed their minds on the question. And by significant, I mean enough to achieve a different result where the question put again. And I would say in the case of Brexit, that is the case also. More than 10% of the public appear to have consistently changed their minds across the United Kingdom. And the third and final test would be this. Is the legislator, the elected body that's given the responsibility, the mandate to discharge the result of the referendum, is it incapable or unwilling to do so? And that third test is one that we are rapidly approaching in the context of the United Kingdom Parliament. Because when Theresa May comes back from Brussels in November, clutching in her hand a piece of paper and saying, I have in my hand the best deal that has ever been achieved in the history of politics, we will know not only is it bogus, but we will know that whatever is in that piece of paper, it will not have majority support on the floor of the House of Commons. We also know that there is not a majority in the House of Commons for saying, cancel the process, let's just remain and stay in the European Union, and nor is there a majority for saying, let's go over the cliff edge, no deal, forget it, we'll just have the hardest Brexit possible. So in that context, as we approach Christmas, Parliament will be in gridlock, in stasis, unable to move the question forward, unable to execute on behalf of the people of the United Kingdom that elected it. And at that point, in my view, the 3 tests will be met, and the only way to go forward on the question will be to consult the people again. Now that means that we would not stand in the way of a second Brexit referendum, were that to come on the agenda towards the turn of the year. But the leadership of our party have quite rightly pointed out a problem, which is this. What if we have a vote all over again, and what if the result is exactly the same? Which is that Scotland votes one way, but is denied the opportunity to go in that direction because of the votes of our larger neighbour south of the border who choose to take us in a different direction. And that is why, before we commit to any second vote on Brexit or people's vote or whatever they call it, we will need to get assurances that if that result is repeated, the people of Scotland, as seems likely by an even bigger majority, declare that they want to retain their European citizenship, then the Scottish Government must be able and given the powers in order to make that so, and to have a different relationship with the European Union than the one that people want to have in England and possibly in Wales. And I think unless those conditions are met, it is very, very hard indeed to see how we can go forward and have a second Brexit referendum. But my prediction is that one way or another, this may happen. I don't know whether we get to a referendum or a general election first, but one way or other, there is going to have to be a consultation with the electorate of the United Kingdom again in quite a short timescale. Now that means that we need to be ready. We need to be ready to present an alternative. Actually, I don't know what will come first, a referendum, a general election, or even an independence referendum. But we need to be making contingency plans and preparations for all 3. And we need to have the answers that we didn't have 4 years ago in order to convince a majority of our neighbours and citizens to come and rally behind the cause of Scottish independence. And I can't go on for very much longer, but I want to chuck in some ideas, and perhaps we can develop this in the question and answer. Some of the things that we will need to respond to in the debate ahead as we take on our opponents. The first is this, that we are constantly called nationalists by people who, when they pronounce the word, do it as if it was a swear word. They do it as if it was something defamatory and derogatory, something divisive. They do it to try and put us down. They do it to try and make a connection, however tenuous, between the aspirations of people in Scotland for their own self-government and the death camps of Eastern Europe. That, frankly, is the political game that they are trying to engage in. And we need to respond to that. We need to respond to that with conviction and pride. Because how often have you heard Labour politicians stand up and say, the working class of Glasgow have got more in common with the working class of Liverpool than they have with the landed gentry of either country? Well, that's such a glib and obvious statement that of course it's true. We believe that. Ordinary working people in Glasgow, of course they have more in common with ordinary working people in Liverpool, in Manchester. And when it comes to it, in Chicago or Frankfurt, Dusseldorf, any other city or conurbation in the world, of course they have. But when we advocate a national interest, we don't say that everybody in Scotland will benefit from this proposition. We advocate as a national interest on behalf of the majority of the people in Scotland. It is, in a sense, the public interest. We're not advocating for more powers and money to the people that own the Highlands or the aristocracy that exists in its vestige in Scotland. Of course not. In fact, they know that more than anybody else. That's why they're spending an awful lot of money funding the campaigns against us. So when we advocate in terms of a national Scottish interest, we are advocating precisely on behalf of ordinary working people, the length and breadth of this country, and we should be proud to say so. And those who stand in our way are defending an out-of-date, archaic system of the British state which is preventing those people in Glasgow and in Liverpool being able to change the circumstances in which they find themselves. So we shouldn't be taking any lectures or insults from the Labour Party on this question. And the second thing, well, excuse me, long journey. The second thing that they call us is they call us separatists. Separatists. Why do we want to turn our backs on everyone? As if we were going to dig a new trench along the border of Scotland and England, as if we were going to rebuild Hadrian's Wall or float the country off into the North Sea. We're not separating. The bad news for them is that we're not separating from anyone. We'll still be here after independence. We will be part of the island of Britain because we have every bit as much right to be here as anybody else. The difference will be that the people who live in this country called Scotland, in the northern part of this country of Britain, they will be in control of their own affairs, and they will begin the process of constructing a new country, a new society, based on the values of equality and democracy and fairness, which will leave the old order standing behind and not knowing what to do with itself. And when we do that, as I have long advocated, that will be a catalyst for changes beyond our borders. That will be a catalyst for changes throughout these islands, throughout this continent. And we in Scotland can give confidence by declaring our self-government, by declaring our right to control our own future. We can give confidence to people elsewhere in the British Isles and in Europe who wish to see exactly the same sort of democratic changes as we aspire to. So far from being separatists, actually, Scottish independence is the thing that will improve relations between the peoples of Scotland and England and all of the people of these islands. And we should present that as a positive, progressive case and demand that the left in the United Kingdom and the left in England in particular, and those who aspire to changing the situation in Britain, that they support and they endorse and do not stand in the way of our case. And let me, what we got left? Not being counted, sorry. I wanted to say one other thing as well, that we will need to dust down the prospectus on which we are asking people to vote for. We will need to explain, in words of one syllable quite often, exactly how people's lives will be made better by having political control over their own future. how the resources of this country can be marshalled to the benefit of most of the people who live here rather than a small few. And we will need to give examples of that, and there are so many. You only have to take the way in which the funding of renewable energy in this country is controlled in London, and they have decided to switch funding from marine tidal power, which is very relevant to Scotland, in favour of solar power, which is very relevant to the southeast of England. It couldn't be more blatant the way in which something which has got a major and obvious priority in a Scottish context is reduced to an also-ran if you look at it in the terms of United Kingdom context. And throughout every area of policy, there are similar examples that can be given. But I think we also have to be very clear to people. We have to be very clear that independence is not about a particular endpoint. It is not about saying that if you vote yes for Scotland to become independent, this will become, a libertarian Scotland or a socialist Scotland or a green Scotland or whatever. It's about the right to choose. It's about making these choices the preserve of the people who live in this country and not of anyone else. So actually we need to encourage people that by voting for independence, they then get the option. They get the option to be able to decide for themselves what type of country they want to live in, how they want its resources to be shared out, and what sort of relationship they want to have with other countries in the world. Which brings me back to finish where I started. That will also mean the right to determine what sort of relationship we want with the continent of Europe and with the European Union. Because I believe that should be a matter in an independent Scotland to be put to a vote of the Scottish people once the Scottish Government has negotiated a new deal with Brussels. And I will firmly be campaigning for a yes vote in that Scotland should be a European nation. It's absolutely in our interests. But even those who are unsure about the European Union, even those people who claim they voted yes but then voted to leave the European Union, surely they must agree that the most important question is not exactly the relationship that Scotland has with the European Union, but whether that decision is taken by the people who live in Scotland or taken by somebody else. And it is this central question of having the right to choose, having the power to be able to look at the things available to you and decide which one is best for you. That is the power of independence. That is what we offer people, the opportunity to take control over their own lives, the opportunity to build a better future without the structures of the 18th century getting in their way and frustrating those aspirations. And I'm very confident that when the dust begins to settle, when these tectonic plates of politics grind to a halt, and we can see through the horizon the options that are presented to us by Theresa May and her government, or even for that matter, by the Labour Party and their perspectives too, I am confident that we can get a majority in this country to say we can do a lot better than that. And it's time now, after 300 years, to take back control ourselves, to take back the power, and to choose a different path. If we do that, I know we can win.
Thank you very much to Tommy for giving us a bit of national, international, local context around about all the issues there.
And that was the excellent Stacey Bradley winding up for Tommy Sheppard there. Stacey is the SNP's organisation convener, and she's doing an excellent job this year, as well as she did hosting the Talking Independence event the other night. Now, I hope you enjoyed Tommy's talk. I found it very entertaining and very informative, and I hope you did too. Now, if you are one of those listening who are still unsure about Scottish independence, I hope Tommy gave you enough food for thought to hopefully think again. I personally think, and so do many others, that Scotland should be an independent country, looking after its own affairs, making its own decisions, and I think we do far better than it's being done on our behalf. And so, till next time from Calling Scotland, Alaba Gubra.